to be back with you. Tonight we're going to be talking about Lent. I have a daughter who lives in Los Angeles. I was talking to her over the weekend, and she told me that last week there was a couple of days where it hit 80 degrees, or like mid-80s. And we had some real nice weather here last week. And so when we get these periods of nice weather, it's kind of a reminder to us that there's a special season right around the corner. Can anyone tell me what that is? Lent, yes, but that's true. Any other season that anyone's looking forward to? Spring, yes. And what sport do we play? Baseball. There we go. And what is the prelude to baseball? Spring training. Right. And you get these ball players who, they make millions and millions of dollars, and their year goes up to September, and then they take a vacation from baseball for 5 months. And it's great because you make that kind of money during your time off. You travel the world, you vacation in all the nice places, eat in all the nice restaurants, you hang out with your friends and your family, and then around this time of year you get a call. You got to come to spring training. You got to come to the desert. That's where a lot of them go, to Scottsdale, and they gotta get back into it, right? And so, a lot of times people ask me, well, this whole Lent thing, what's that all about? And truth be told, it's really spring training for Catholics. It really is. I mean, when you think about it, and you'll see it tonight, Lent is spring training for Catholics, because just like the ball players, us Catholics, from time to time, we take a vacation from God. Now, some of you out there, well, not me. I never take a vacation from God. Truth be told, we all, maybe not for 5 months, but for some period of time, we take a vacation from God. And we need Lent to get us to refocus, to get us to recalibrate. And that's what Lent's all about. You see, the ball players, when they go to spring training, the objective is for them to physically get in condition, to get ready for the regular season, right? They want to physically get in shape. We do the same thing in Lent, but in Lent, what we're trying to engage is not our physical selves. What we're trying to engage is our spiritual selves. And so during this time, we are faced with the reality that human beings are both physical and spiritual. Right? We're both physical and spiritual. And we're confronted with that reality during Lent. And we're forced to engage that spiritual side of us. And that's what the focus is on Lent. You might ask, okay, well, this whole Lent idea, when does it all start? It starts tomorrow. Ash Wednesday. You may have heard of Ash Wednesday. And you may say, well, you got to go to church on Ash Wednesday. You should. I don't think it's a holy day of obligation. No, but I think it's you should go. And so you might ask, well, why isn't it Ash Sunday? So we could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. You go to Mass on Sunday and you get credit for your ashes. It doesn't work like that. The reason why it's on a Wednesday is because Lent is the 40 days that precedes Holy Week. Holy Week culminates on Easter Sunday, right? And the week that leads up to that Sunday, well, you have Holy Thursday night. That is the night of the Last Supper, followed by Good Friday, which is the day that Christ was crucified, and then followed by Easter Sunday, when Christ rose. So that's Holy Week. And so what we're starting tomorrow is that 40-day period up until Easter to get ourselves in shape, okay, spiritually. Right? The ball players, they get ready for opening day. I think that's like late March. They start a little earlier before us, Easter this year is, I think, April 20th, around there.
Right.
So we have a little over 40 days to do a lot of work. And the things that we will learn tonight will help us get to where we want to go. So that when Holy Week comes, we can properly appreciate what it is we're celebrating when Christ has the Last Supper, when Christ is crucified, when Christ rises from the dead. It puts us in the right frame of mind so that we can appreciate what it is we're celebrating. How do we do that? Well, during Lent, we engage in 3 different activities. Can anyone tell me what they are? Okay. Yes, you're right. Fasting, prayer, and almsgiving. And tonight, we're going to go through each of these. Okay? You may have heard a little bit about, that's what Catholics do. They fast during Lent. That's only one of the 3 things that we focus on during Lent. The other 2 are equally as important: prayer and almsgiving. Almsgiving is oftentimes synonymous with doing good works. But you'll see that this is just like spring training, right? I mean, when the ball players get called back to spring training, keep in mind, they've been eating at all the nicest restaurants. They haven't been watching their weight. They've been going back for seconds, eating desserts, the whole thing. They get to spring training, and some of these guys have their own chefs. They have dietitians working with them. They watch everything that they eat. Catholics, we do the same thing. We just call it fasting. It's just a little different, right? The ball players, they all get mentally prepared, right? There's this whole idea of mental preparation for the regular season. You have to be mentally prepared. We call it the vision principle. If you're playing the infield and there's less than 2 out, you get a ground ball to you, you got to know what to do. If there's a runner on third, you look the runner back, you go to first. Everybody knows that. They have to mentally prepare themselves for the regular season, so it's just reflexive, right? We do the same thing in Lent. We just call it prayer. But you'll see it's the same thing. Mentally, we're getting ourselves ready on what it is we need to focus on. And finally, ball players will tell you, well, spring training is great because we get our reps in, right? We get our at-bats in. We get real game scenarios where we can get our reps in. It's really, it helps us for the regular season. Again, Catholics during Lent, we do the same thing. We just call it almsgiving. We think of good works we can do during this period of time, and we do them with the hope that after Lent is over, we do them, and it's not a big deal. It becomes reflexive. When we're faced with an opportunity, we just engage in that activity. So, of course I'm joking, but I am trying to make this point that there are a lot of similarities between what the ball players experience in spring training and what Catholics experience, and the purpose is of Lent. So, where does this all start? Whose idea was this? It was Christ's idea. And we look in the Bible to see where it is the period of Lent comes from. Specifically, it's Matthew chapter 4. And in this part of the Bible, it's important to know where it appears. In the Gospel of Matthew, it starts out with the birth of Jesus. Then it goes to John the Baptist. And then it goes to Christ being led into the desert by the Holy Spirit, where Christ is tempted by the devil. Right? He hasn't performed any miracles. He hasn't gotten his team together. He hasn't done anything. But it's the first thing that happens in the Gospel of Matthew. He's led into the desert to be tempted by the devil. So, Matthew chapter 4. Verse 1. Then Jesus was led into the desert by the Spirit to be tempted by the devil. And after fasting 40 days and 40 nights, 40, you get the 40? 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. And the tempter came and said to him, If thou art the Son of God, command that these stones become loaves of bread. But he answered and said, It is written, Not by bread alone does man live, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. Then the devil took him into the holy city and set him on the pinnacle of the temple and said to him, If thou art the Son of God, throw thyself down, for it is written, He will give his angels charge concerning thee, and upon their hands they shall bear thee up, lest thou dash thy foot against a stone. Jesus said to him, It is written further, Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. Again the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them. And he said to him, All these things will I give thee, if thou wilt fall down and worship me. Then Jesus said to him, Begone, Satan, for it is written, The Lord thy God shalt thou worship, and him alone shalt thou serve. Then the devil left him, and behold, angels came and ministered to him. So how are we to interpret this tempting that takes place in the desert? Well, the way the church fathers have interpreted it is, you look at it and you see that the devil tempts him 3 times, 3 different ways. The first time, Jesus has been in the desert about 40 days. He's got to be hungry. 40 days in the desert, he's got to be starving, right? A physical desire that he has, no doubt. And the devil says to him, why don't you make these stones into bread? Well, the way the church fathers have interpreted this is the devil tempting Jesus to try and get him to yearn for these physical desires, desires of good feelings, desires for pleasure. And Christ says no. Now, how are we today tempted to feel good? Countless ways, right? Countless ways. Eating, drinking, sex, whatever it might be. And mind you, Catholics, we're not Puritans. We're not saying that these things are bad, that these things are wrong. But what we're saying is that they must be given a certain order. And if these desires control or dominate our lives, then where is God? God is a lesser desire than these. And so the church fathers would interpret this as saying this is the devil tempting Christ the same way we're tempted today to feel good one way or another. The second temptation the devil makes is when he takes Jesus to the pinnacle of the temple. Now, in biblical times, the temple was the center of society. Okay? In the context of politics, in the context of culture, religion, the temple was the center of society. And the pinnacle on top of the temple couldn't get any bigger up there. That is where the image of a person could be such that everyone would give glory to that person who is on the pinnacle of the temple. All honor, all esteem, all there to admire. And the devil is offering that to Christ. And the church fathers say, that's another way we are tempted. How many times are we tempted for honor, to want to be noticed, to want to have control over other people, to get that ultimate respect? That's a temptation. That's a temptation. Now, desiring respect and having a place of authority in itself is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. But when it is the center of our lives and it dominates how it is we live our lives, where's God? Where's our desire for God? And so that is what the early church fathers, how they interpreted that. The final temptation that the devil takes to Christ is he shows him all the kingdoms of the world, okay, and offers him all this wealth, all this power. Another temptation that we can see today, wealth and power. Again, wealth, power, in and of themselves, they're not bad. But when they're the center of our lives and they dominate how we live our lives, that's where we have a problem. So, it's important to note again that this experience that Christ had with the devil came before he started his ministry, such that he could show that he was not owned by any of these worldly desires, and then he could start his ministry. Now, these things, wealth, pleasure, honor, power, these are the things that get us, right? To one degree or another. Wealth, honor, power, pleasure. And I want to start now with and give you just a brief exercise. And I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to picture Christ hanging on the cross. Keep in mind now, he has been whipped. He's had a crown of thorns put on his head. He's been forced to lay down on a cross, at which time nails or spikes were driven through his hands and one through his leg. He's been stripped of all his garments. And then this cross is erected up high. And as he hangs on that cross, I want you to ask yourself, to what extent is Christ at that moment owned by any of these earthly desires? The earthly desire for pleasure. To what extent is he owned by that? Matter of fact, he's experienced the antithesis of pleasure. Sheer agony, torture. To what extent is he owned by our human desire for honor? Absolutely not. He's been mocked. He's been spit upon. He's been stripped of his garments. To what extent, as Christ hangs on the cross, is he owned by our earthly desire for wealth and power? He's got nothing. Absolutely nothing. He's absolutely powerless, as a matter of fact. The only thing that he desires at that time is to do the will of God. And so, you can open your eyes now. And so, that is where Christ is when he begins his ministry. He's able to show, because remember, Christ is fully human and fully divine. So he is subject to these earthly human desires that we all are. And he knew that he could not do what he was sent here to do if he was owned by any of these other earthly desires. So, Lent is all about ordering these desires. Okay? It's ordering the desires. And so, from the desert, Christ begins his mission. So, what is Christ's mission? Well, first of all, he's there. He was put on earth to evangelize, to lead people to the Father. And secondly, to teach us how to love. Right? Now, the way Christ teaches us to love It's a very different love than the kind of love we celebrated on the 14th of February, right? The kind of love we celebrate on Valentine's Day has to do with, falling in love. It's an emotional thing. Very important, not insignificant, very important. But it's a different type of love that Jesus is talking about. The type of love that Jesus is talking about, he speaks of in John chapter 15. And I want to read that to you. Verse 12. He says, "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love than this no one has, that one lay down his life for his friends." So, right off the bat, we know that what Christ is talking about it's not a sentimentality type of love. It's a type of love that requires self-sacrifice, right? Now, does that mean that we're all called to lay down our lives for our friends? To some degree, yes. Not like Christ did for all of us, but to some degree, to sacrifice yourself in some way, even some little way, for the good of somebody else. Bishop Barron calls it willing the good of the other, and then acting out of that desire. So that's why when Christ says, love your enemies, you might say, that's crazy. Love my enemies. Not love them like you love your spouse, but to will their good, and then to act out of that desire. And that might only be saying a prayer for that person, right? But how often do we love our enemies? How often do we pray for our enemies? How often do we desire what's best for them? But that's what Christ wants us to do. And so he says in John that it's not a feeling. Love is not a feeling. It's not how I feel towards you. Moreover, it's a choice you make. It's a choice. And he's asking us to make that choice to ourselves and to our neighbor. Okay. Now, what prevents us from walking this path, from doing these things, from living the type of life that Christ wants us to live, that we learn in the gospel, and teaching us how to love, what that means? We try and do that. What prevents us from doing that? Temptation. Goes back to Christ in the desert, right? It's the devil trying to knock Jesus off his path. The devil does the same thing to us today, right? Constantly. By presenting us with scenarios where we're tempted. Remember those 4 big things: wealth, power, pleasure, honor. You're tempted, to some degree or another. And the question is, how strong is your desire for one of those things, such that you'll bite? So that you'll engage your desire for wealth, power, pleasure, honor, in a way that you shouldn't, right? In a way that it's controlling your life. So the devil wants us to make the satisfaction of those desires the center of our life. And I think it's funny, show of hands, has anyone seen Al Pacino in Scarface? A lot of people have. Okay. Well, I don't want to ruin it for those who you haven't, but I'm going to tell you a little bit. There's a scene in that movie that, in my opinion, just epitomizes a person's absolute desire for wealth, power, pleasure, and honor. All those worldly desires. So, without ruining it for you, Scarface, Al Pacino plays, he's a kid, he comes over from Cuba in the early 80s. And he is by himself, he has a couple of friends. But he gets into dealing drugs, narcotics trafficking, low level at first. But then he works his way up. And over time, he is able to establish this empire. He's a major narcotics trafficker, exceedingly wealthy. All the cocaine he could get, right? Sex, power, pleasure, honor, all of those. He's getting all of those things, right? But he gets into it. I mean, he's doing deals with the cartels in South America. That's where this guy's at. And he's in Miami. And he's got this huge estate. In the end, he crosses one of the cartel members in South America, and they send like a small army up to kill him. And he's in his estate, and this estate's unreal. Those of you who've seen the movie, you know exactly what I'm referring to. So he's got these two staircases that come up to this giant landing. At the top of the landing, this big landing, and it leads into his office. But down, when you look over from the landing down to the first floor, you've got these two staircases that come up. There's a fountain. There's a fountain in his house with a big statue, right? And at the top, there's a light that says the motto, "The world is yours," right? The world, you know it, you've seen it, right? All have that urge. Anyway, this is a small sidetrack. But what Christ wants from us is the same thing that he wanted. He wants us to know and to do the will of God. Okay? That's what he wants from us. So, what does that have to do with Lent? Well, let's start with fasting. Those of you who have heard about fasting, maybe you've heard a little bit, that's what you Catholics do during Lent. You don't eat chocolates, right? You give up candy or something like that. I don't understand. What is it you Catholics have against chocolate? Chocolate's good. And when we're kids, that's what we're taught too. You give up stuff, but you don't understand the meaning really behind it. Really, when you talk about fasting, it's about really this whole idea of attachment and detachment. Whether it be food or something else, what is it you're attached to, right? What is it that you really, really like to do? And maybe it is chocolates. Maybe it is, having a coffee every day or or 3 times a day. What is it that you really have a strong desire for? And what we do during Lent is we try to see if we can detach ourselves from that, right? So, maybe it is chocolate. Maybe you like chocolate, you have it all the time. Well, maybe during this Lenten period, you're going to put aside your shallow desire for chocolate and you're going to replace it with a deeper desire for God. Okay? That's what we're trying to do here. Again, during this 40-day period, we're trying to engage that spiritual side of us that lays just so lazy so much of the year, right? We really want to engage it, and we want it to dominate our physical side, to see if we can make that happen, right? So that's what really the idea of it is to see if we can detach ourselves from those things that we have a desire for. Now, when it comes to food, there are certain things you can give up. And this whole notion of fasting comes to us from Matthew again. Matthew chapter 6, verse 1 through 6. This is what Christ taught his disciples. When you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites. They neglect their appearance, so they may appear to others to be fasting. Amen, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face,
so that you may not appear to be fasting, except to your Father who is hidden. So again, this whole practice of fasting, it's not to show other people how good we are. It's not to, so that you can brag about, oh, look, I'm making this. It's an inner deal. You're trying to work on your inner self, okay? And so that is what the whole purpose of it is. Now, we know that in biblical times, Jewish people fasted on their Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement. And on the Yom Kippur, the Jewish people would fast to atone for their sins as a form of penance, okay? Now, and we do that as well. Now, one thing I neglected to say, and it's reflected, it's one of the things we do on Ash Wednesday. When you go to Mass tomorrow, and you will go to Mass tomorrow, at the end, you get your ashes, right? So what's that all about? Well, these ashes, where do they come from? So on Easter Sunday, the Sunday before Easter Sunday is Palm Sunday, okay? And on Palm Sunday, when you go to Mass, you get a palm, right? And it's meant to commemorate the time when Christ arrived in Jerusalem the week before he was crucified. This is the very end of his ministry. He just raised Lazarus from the dead, performing all these miracles. Word had gotten out that Christ was really doing amazing things. So when he got to Jerusalem, people were waiting for him. They thought he was the Messiah. He wasn't the type of Messiah that they were thinking, but they all came out and they'd lay their coats and their blankets out as he came down, and they would wave these big palms. And that's what we commemorate on Palm Sunday. So after Mass, when we celebrate Palm Sunday, those palms are gathered up and they're burned. And the ashes from those palms are what you receive on Ash Wednesday. So tomorrow when you get your ashes, those are from the palms from last year's Palm Sunday, okay? And again, the purpose, the theme of Ash Wednesday is to get us to remember that we are both body and soul. Our body is temporal, our soul is eternal, okay? And you have to juxtapose those on Ash Wednesday. And after you, at the end of Mass, you go up and either the priest or one of the lay people will have the ashes, and they will make the sign of the cross on your forehead. And I think the prayer that the person will say is, remember that you are dust, and unto dust you shall return. Okay? Not very uplifting, but it's calling us to remember that our physical bodies are temporal, right? We came from dust, and unto dust we shall return. But our souls are eternal. That spiritual side of us is eternal, and that's what we start engaging tomorrow. I just didn't want to leave that out. Okay. So Christ tells us how to fast. And what about the Catholic Church? What does the Catholic Church tell us to do as it relates to fasting? What are the official rules? I don't know if I've got this right. I think I'm close. And someone, and maybe can correct me if I get this wrong. But the teaching of the Catholic Church is that as it relates to fasting during Lent, we are to abstain from eating meat on all Fridays during Lent, and to fast, and that means one meal or 2 small meals. We are to fast on Ash Wednesday, which is tomorrow, and Good Friday. So again, the Catholic teaching is, as it relates to fasting during Lent, we are asked to abstain from eating meat on all Fridays and to fast on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. Now, some of you might say, that's great, I don't eat meat, right? That's easy. No. Again, get back to what the purpose is. The purpose is to find something that you have an attachment to and see if you can detach yourself from it, right? Some people have an attachment to these, right? So maybe during Lent, you're going to try for a period of time to detach yourself from these. Maybe you have an attachment to always having to have the remote clicker when you or your family are watching TV. No one else can have it because you're the only one who knows how to use it, right? Sometimes, I just learned today that Saint Teresa of Avila, she was a saint who lived back in the 1500s. She had an addiction. She had an addiction. Saint Teresa of Avila was an avid reader. Loved to read. Problem was, she read trash. She read these books about knights and chivalry, and she couldn't put them down. I guess they're like the modern-day romance novels. This is in her autobiography, right? And she says, I was reading these books all the time, and I knew it was getting between me and my relationship with God, because I'm spending all my time reading these books, right? So she knew she had this attachment that she had to detach herself from. So, if you don't eat meat, find something that in your life you're attached to and see if you can detach yourself from it to engage that deeper desire for God. Okay? Now, how are we doing? I think this is a good time to take a break. And when we get back, we're going to finish with prayer, and then we're going to do almsgiving. Okay? So we'll take a break. John and Olivia, can you raise your hands? John and Olivia. Where's Olivia? There she is. Thank you for bringing the food tonight. Okay. So during the break, I was corrected. I knew I'm not good on a lot of this stuff. So the rules are, and get it right, I'm going to ask Pat and John to get it right. Because Pat, as it relates to fasting, what did I say wrong?
You didn't say anything wrong about fasting.
I didn't include something. You're supposed to.
Well, fasting would be one meal, and you could have two small meals, but they shouldn't make up a second meal.
So it's not one meal and then two small ones?
Yeah, it is.
It is.
But the two small ones shouldn't be, if you add them together, shouldn't be another meal. It
Okay.
should be less.
Point is, after you finish eating, you're still supposed to be hungry.
Between the ages of 18 and 59.
What's that now? 18 and 59?
So this is the church's teaching. That doesn't mean somebody making a fast. It just means that those are the ones that the church asks to do.
God. Okay. And you have to be older than 14, right, John?
Yeah, so 18, 15. Caveat, if you have health issues, you don't put yourself at risk.
Good point.
It's like a lot of diabetics shouldn't fast, generally speaking, right? So if you have health issues, you're not required to fast.
Got it.
Then for abstinence, not eating meat on Friday, they're going over 14.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so prayer.
If they want to,
Prayer.
go back to it.
This is a good one, right? Sometimes people coming into RCIA, they do not want to talk about this. Because this whole prayer thing, oftentimes it's very difficult for someone who's just beginning this faith journey. And it's understandable. What is it? What is this prayer thing? I don't feel I'm doing it right. I don't know how to do it.
And that's for people who are just coming into the faith, right? Totally understandable. Let me tell you what the perspective is from a cradle Catholic, someone who was born into this religion, and we grew up praying. When you first start out praying, your prayer typically goes like this. Hello, God. I want this, 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 I want this. Thank you, God. I'll see you tomorrow. And then what happens is, over time, even as a kid, you start thinking, well, I pray, I ask for a lot of stuff, and God doesn't answer my prayers. So what's going on with that? And sometimes they say, all this stuff happens to me. I've asked for other things, I haven't gotten them. So I don't believe in God. I don't believe in prayer. It doesn't work. Hopefully, over time, when a young person gets older, they realize there's a lot more to prayer. And it isn't just asking for stuff. That's kind of like what you call Santa praying. But at its essence, prayer is just raising your heart and your mind to God. That's all it is. Raising your heart and your mind to God, you're praying. What does that mean? Well, when you, in a very conscious way, are aware of God's presence, and in your heart, you're having this mental dialogue with God, when you tell God in a very conscious way what your needs are, what your thoughts are, what your feelings are, that's prayer. Okay? There's no magic to it. But there is a key. There is a key to successful prayer. Silence and solitude. It's fundamental to prayer. If you can't get silence and solitude, it makes prayer really tough. And how many of us here tonight can say, you know what? I've got so much silence and solitude in my life, I can pray any time of day. It doesn't exist, does it? Because we got work, we got families, we've got kids, we've got errands, we've got all kinds of stuff. Our world is so noisy and so busy that trying to find a small period of time of silence and solitude will not happen unless you carve it out. It just won't. If you think that, I'll just wait for a period of time where I can experience some silence and solitude, you won't ever pray. Not successfully. So you've got to carve it out. You've got to find a time during your day, whether it's 5 minutes. Carve it out where you can go somewhere where there's silence and solitude. Maybe it's the backyard. Maybe it's in church on your way home. Maybe it's upstairs or downstairs or somewhere else in your house. At a time during the day when you can achieve silence and solitude. Get that first. It's essential to prayer. Essential. Okay? All right, let's say you get over the first hurdle. You're able to raise your heart and mind to God, and you can find a place of silence and solitude. What about all these prayers? I mean, there's hundreds of them, thousands of them. Well, there's a lot of real simple ones, too. Psalm 46. When you find your place of silence and solitude, I recommend you sit down. Don't lie down. Sit down. You lie down, you'll fall asleep. Trust me. But sit down, get comfortable, close your eyes, get conscious of your breathing,
and just say to yourself, be still and know that I am God. 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 What happens is your mind starts to think about what it is you're saying. Be still and know that I am God. God, who is the creator of the world, who is our creator, who put us here, who has a mission for us, a purpose for us. And it starts you thinking of these things that call you into relationship with God. Very simple. But simplicity is genius. And that's one prayer. Do that for 3 minutes, 5 minutes. That'll be your prayer for the day. See what happens. See what happens. Sometimes a good way to pray is to get a good look at yourself. Right? How often do we get a chance to do that? Right? To get a good look at ourselves. Our strengths and our weaknesses. Right? What are our talents, our gifts, our abilities, our potential? That's really something. How many of us here have ever sat down and given any thought to what your actual potential is? In every aspect of your life. What's your potential as a mother? What's your full potential as a father? What does that person look like? What do you look like when you are at your full potential as an employee or as an employer or as a spouse? What does that person look like? What does the person look like at their full potential who is a child of God? We never take time to think about that, right? We don't. But when you're in prayer, think about what are your talents, your gifts, your abilities, and what do you look like when you're at your full potential? Also look at your weaknesses, your faults, your failings, your flaws, your defects. We don't like to look at those. We don't. But when you sit in prayer, in silence, in solitude, be honest with yourself. We're going to do this in a minute. Okay? I'm going to ask you to get out your journals. I'm going to ask you to take a page, and at the top of it, I want you to write strengths. Talents, gifts, abilities, potential. And not on that same page, but on a different page, because you're going to use this not only tonight, but going forward. I want you to write weaknesses. What are your faults? What are your failings? What are your flaws, your defects? Get a look at yourself and see, what does the best version of me look like? So let's just take 5 minutes and do that. This is all for yourself. We're not sharing this with anyone. This is for your own personal reflection. What I had intended this to be was something that you could not only use tonight, but going forward when you do pray, maybe during Lent. There's so many different ways to pray. This is just one of them, where you get a look at yourself, right? Because what happens when you look at your strengths and you look at your weaknesses and you try and get an idea of what your full potential is in any aspect of your life, what happens? Automatically, you're called to be that person, right? You're focusing on how to become that better person. So that's just one type of prayer, of self-reflection. There are these other short prayers that I'll share a couple of them with you that you can write down. They're not too long. There are these prayers that you repeat, kind of like, be still and know that I am God. There's another one that's called the Jesus Prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of the living God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of the living God, have mercy on me, a sinner. When you find your place of silence and solitude, try saying that for a few minutes and see what it gets you to focus on. Another prayer that I'm particularly fond of, you may have heard of it, it's called the Serenity Prayer. Who among us could not use a little more serenity in our lives, right? Lord, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Again, life is tough, right? We all know that. And there's some things we can change, and there's some things we can't. Family members, friends, sometimes we can't change them, right? God, grant me the serenity to accept them for who they are. As difficult as that might be for me to do, I need serenity to be able to do that. Where I have a situation where I'm faced with, and I could do something about it, give me the courage to do that. You all know in your everyday lives when you're confronted with a situation, it's easy to say, you know what, I just don't want to get involved. I know I could do it, I don't want to do it, because it takes too much self-donation. That's the God's definition of love, is self-donation. But you also got to know which things you can change and which things you can't. And so that's why you pray for wisdom. Okay, the final thing that I wanted to discuss before we move on to almsgiving is if none of these work for you, I've got another option. And on your table there in the middle, there is a little card that says entitled The Prayer Process. Matthew Kelly came up with. Matthew Kelly is an author who is also a Catholic. He's written many books. He came up with this, and I thought it was great. Now, forgive the laminating. It wasn't done professionally. It was done about 30 minutes before I got here tonight. So this is something where, does everyone have one? I got a few extras. Does anyone need one? Yeah, just one? In the back? Okay. So, yeah, a couple. Again, you find your place of silence or solitude and just go over these every night. It takes 6 minutes, 7 minutes maybe. Start with gratitude. Begin by thanking God for a personal Begin by thanking God in a personal dialogue for whatever you are most grateful for today. Now, truth be told, if we were to sit and thank God for everything that we are grateful for, it would take a lot longer than 7 minutes, because we all have been very blessed, haven't we? Right? We can think of, we're here, our health. It would take a lot longer than 7 minutes to complete the list of those things that we're grateful for. But start, right? Things that you're grateful for. Next, awareness. Revisit the times in the past 24 hours when you were and were not the best version of yourself. Talk to God about these situations and what you learned from them. Okay? Again, it's this ability to go back and reflect on yourself and see where it was you measured up and where it was you didn't. We're all sinners, right? We all fail. We all have our faults, our failings, and our weaknesses. But it's good to be able to identify them and see them for what they are. Next, significant moments. Identify something you experienced in the past 24 hours and explore what God might be trying to say to you or through that event or person. It's amazing sometimes when someone comes into your life, shares a story with you, and it's eye-opening. You think back, and who knows what it is, but someone shares something with you and you think, wow, that's amazing. And whether it's a person going through something or an accomplishment, and you might ask yourself, what is God trying to tell me something about putting this someone in my life, crossed my path, and shared this story with me? Oftentimes, when I hear, when I go to a funeral mass, thankfully it's not often, but whenever I go to a funeral mass, I'm reminded of my mortality, right? I'm reminded of things that, life is so fragile. And I'm always reminded of that when I go to a funeral. But why should I have to go to a funeral to be reminded of that? Sometimes these things happen because you're forgetting. And God knows you're forgetting. And you're there for a reason, in part, to be reminded that life is fragile. So ask yourself, what things happen during your day that God might be trying to say to you? Next piece, ask God to forgive you for any wrong you've committed against yourself, another person, or Him, and to fill you with a deep, abiding peace. Now, this peace is not a peace that comes from the result of everything in your life being perfect, right? Because that'll never happen. It's a sense of peace that comes from knowing no matter what, I know it's going to be okay. I know God's with me. That's the sense of peace that you're praying for. Freedom. Speak with God about how He is inviting you to change your life so that you can experience the freedom to be the best version of yourself. That's what we talked about. Others. Lift up to God anyone you feel called to pray for today, asking God to bless and guide them. We always start with your family, right? You ask God to bless your family, your loved ones, your friends, those who you know who need His help. But here, expand your mind, right? How about people in other cities and other countries around the world who you might want to pray for? People in the hospital, people living on the street, whatever, people suffering from addiction, who you don't know, or maybe you do know. Pray for them. And lastly, pray the Our Father. Our Father, say it with me. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. 7 minutes, maybe, in silence and solitude. Do that every day during Lent. Your relationship with God will improve, I promise you. That's the prayer process. Okay, next. I think we went through all of these. Yes. Okay, almsgiving. Alms for the poor, right? This is where this comes from. Basically where you cut the check, right? Where you write a check to a charity. That might be one way you can do almsgiving. Make a donation, right? That's almsgiving. Keep in mind that the type of donation that you're talking about is of self, right? It gets back to Christ's definition of love, that self-sacrifice type of love. So whatever it is, it's got to involve a choice where you're giving of yourself. And it's a situation where, like we talked about, where you will the good of the other and you act out of that will, right? So during Lent, what are some things you can do? What are some concrete activities you can engage in to satisfy this activity, almsgiving or good works? Now, a lot of times people will look at their talents, their abilities, and they'll use those talents and abilities and donate them. I have a friend who's a retired attorney, who will go nameless. As I said, he's retired, but now he spends time offering his legal advice to low-income folks who can't afford an attorney, on landlord-tenant issues or what have you, right? And I have such admiration for that because this person spent their whole career in the legal profession. Now they retire. Now they're giving back of their talent to people who can't afford it. And he does it willingly. He loves it, right? What talent do you have that maybe you can donate to people, right? Maybe it's your cooking. Maybe it's your musical ability. Some way you can donate that to someone during Lent. How do you donate your time, talent, and treasure to those in need? One thing that I've seen done is in families you put a box by the door, by the front door. And the rule is during Lent, every time you go out the door, you put something in the box. You put money in the box. At the end of Lent, it goes to your favorite charity, okay? And the kids get involved too, right? You get the kids involved in what almsgiving is all about. Every time you go out the door, it doesn't matter what it is, you got to put something in that box, right? Maybe their allowance during Lent will need to go up, but it's getting them in the idea of what it means for almsgiving, what it means to give of yourself. And so that's the third. Let's see here. Okay. So, now, getting back to Lent, those are the three things that we've covered tonight, that we focus on during Lent, so that we can spiritually be in tip-top shape for Holy Week, and specifically Easter Sunday. So we have 40 days. Are you with me? We can do this, right? Okay. Are there any questions? No.
Well, just a couple of comments, like the apps, like it's intimidating, right? I remember I've talked to people too that are intimidated to pray, just to get started. So this is wonderful. Thank you, first of all, because I'm on where I am tonight, and the exercise for me is really good. But so yeah, it's intimidating when you first start. So like an app, like Howl, you mentioned Howl tonight. Somebody did, right? That's a great app, and I think the app the first 3 months free. I just got a thing on my phone. But so if anybody's intimidated to pray, and also listening, like we can talk to God all day long. I've challenged myself, my brother and I talk about this too, it's like try to listen to God as well as trying, to communicate. And I know just one last thing, the rosary, because that's intimidating too. So I'm just starting to do that a little bit, but that's good on the app as well, because you can kind of follow along.
Very good point. Leslie, have we done the class on the rosary yet?
Not yet, that's coming after this.
Coming up. Yes, and that's another very, productive, useful way to pray. And you ask, okay, well, how does God speak to me, right? I mean, I haven't ever met someone who's heard the booming voice from above talking to somebody. That happened to me, not saying it doesn't, but how does God talk to us? Well, I think he talks to us in a lot of different ways, right? First of all, he's talking to us through the gospel, right? Read the gospel. He's talking to each and every one of us in the gospel, right? What about those desires that we have? Those desires that really are at the deep part of our soul, what we yearn for. Who put those there? God put those there. He's talking to us through what he has given to us in our heart, what we really yearn for. And it's different. Everybody is different. We don't all yearn for the same thing necessarily, right? So God talks to us in many different ways. It's not always, a booming voice from above. But I think that when you think about the gospel messages and deep, deep desires that he's put in your heart, and the people in your life, how you can love them, I think he's talking to you in that way.